Welcome to the Creative Cast. I'm your host, Tammy Munson, podcast producer, coach, and CEO of Wildfire Creative. Are you struggling to grow and monetize your podcast? Want to learn more about starting your own podcast? Are you looking for the secrets behind the business side of podcasting? Well, friends, you are in the right place. Here on the Creative Cast, I'm going to be sharing all the tips and tricks on all things podcasting for the faith-based podcaster. Each episode is going to contain powerful information to help you get started with your own podcast, learn the secrets of building a business, and of course, growing and monetizing your podcast. All right, y'all, without further ado, let's get started. Hey friends, welcome to the Creative Cast. I, of course, am Tammy Munson, your host here. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you so much for all the emails and DMs that you sent about last week's episode. It just warmed my heart. It makes me so happy that you enjoyed that episode and that you got some really great things out of it. As inspiration strikes, I will definitely do more episodes like that. But I just want to ask, could y'all do me a favor? Can y'all go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review and a rating there for the Creative Cast? I would greatly appreciate it. 5 stars if you're so inclined. And I want you to tell me what you like about the podcast. Maybe your favorite episode, something that helped you, whatever it is. And if you do, you'll definitely be added to my favorites list. I'll even be reading some of the reviews on future shows. So if you're a podcaster as well, drop your podcast name in the review and I will go ahead and read it on the show. So as promised, today we are talking about podcast brand identity, all that kind of stuff. But before I forget, make sure that you stay until the very end because I'm also answering a podcast question. And the question today is, which type of mic should I use? An XLR or a USB? Now, I get this question a lot from new podcasters looking to upgrade their setup. So definitely stay for the end and tune in for that question. Okay, so let's talk about your podcast brand identity. Every podcaster's dream is to build an audience so connected to their show that listeners will go out of their way to evangelize it and share it with everyone they know, right? Right. You may have other goals, of course you do, but this one drives all the other things. So how do top podcasters achieve such a incredible following? What's the secret? No worries, friends. I am sharing that with you today. Okay? Are you ready? It all starts with understanding the concept of branding. I know, it seems really simple, right? But creating these deep connections is not always easy. And it does not happen overnight. However, implementing these core branding principles to your podcast and investing in your podcast identity will turn your listeners into diehard fans, loyal to your podcast brand. Now, the word brand has become quite the buzzword. And in my opinion, it's really overused, but knowing your podcast brand is absolutely essential. Now, I find that so many people, including some of my launch clients, confuse brand with branding, but it's really an important one in the podcasting industry. By knowing your podcast brand can make everything from writing an episode to marketing it significantly more manageable. So why do you need a brand for your podcast? Because it helps those that may come across it instantly understand what it is or who it belongs to. For example, you see the swoosh logo. You know that it's Nike, right? But in marketing, we go beyond just that collection of letters, numbers, and symbols that make up a logo. A brand is how people feel about and engage with your product, your service, or your podcast. Now, ladies, if your husband, spouse, or partner brings home a little light blue box with a white ribbon, you know instantly where that's from. Tiffany & Company, right? And you know that you're about to get really happy. I mean, wouldn't that be nice? I would love it. Hint, hint, husband, birthday's coming in January. But anyway, it creates an emotion just by seeing the logo, or sometimes seeing the box, or the bag, or just letters. But my point is, brands tell us a story, and they create the emotions that go with that story. Because remember, it's about storytelling, right? Now, your overall podcast brand identity covers colors, fonts, etc. And really what your brand represents. It encompasses how both current listeners and future ones perceive and feel about your brand. And believe it or not, you have a lot of control over that. But along with podcasting being a long-term game, shaping your brand identity takes time. And so consistency is the most essential factor, as with most things in podcasting, right? That seems to be my favorite word on every show, consistency. But that's the name of the game. Because your podcast brand should be reflected in your podcast artwork, your website design, and all across your social media platforms. Like I said, the key is being consistent and staying true to your brand in every aspect, letting your podcast personality shine through. Now, as you may have heard me talk about on other episodes of the Creative Cast, your podcast is ultimately alive solely because of your listeners. Just as your podcast brand is unique, so are your listeners. So envision their journey as they discover your podcast and get down to the details of what it will take to make their experience with your podcast brand unique and enjoyable. So what really goes into building a solid brand strategy? My first tip is focus on your niche audience. Who are you speaking to? Identifying your focus audience is the foundation of building your brand. Because remember, the most important thing is that you simply cannot be everything to everyone. So niche down. Identify who is your ideal listener. Who is she or who is he? What do they do? What are they interested in? What do they care about? Are they parents? Are they single? Are they married? The key here is to get very specific, because you can tailor your message to their needs and their wants by understanding precisely who you are trying to reach. Now, next, let's talk about voice. Now, I know that I talked about this on last week's episode, but it's really something that you need to nail down, especially if you are in growth stage. So you've launched your podcast, developing your community, you're getting new listeners, you're ready to grow. Every podcast, and every host for that matter, has a unique style. So let yourself be creative and uniquely you. Find ways to personalize everything you do on your show, allowing your brand voice to shine through as well. Then bring this voice and personality into everything related to your podcast, including your website, any products or courses that you put out, and even the spirit of the podcast community that you're creating, that you're growing. Even use the same music from your podcast on your videos or other forms of content. So if you're creating audiograms for your podcast, incorporate that same music so people start to identify that music with you and your podcast. Okay, tip number 3. Solidify your brand's presence. So along with creating a consistent podcast brand, you also want to ensure that it is well represented. You can join podcast groups that share your views and establish a presence in those communities, making your podcast brand visible to listeners who may be interested in your message, your story, your community. The other thing, you want to make it easy for newcomers to get to know your podcast brand by creating a list of all the places they can find you, sites you may have been featured on, or any content you have made, especially for your audience. You want to put this on your website and, of course, drive that traffic there. If you're on Apple, list it. Spotify, Stitcher, all the places. Now, you don't have to name every single one where you can find your podcast, but put it on the really big ones. Also, make it easy for guests and listeners to share details about the show and specific episodes. Share your podcast brand across all social channels, ensuring your message is clear and evident in everything you create and put out there on the internet. You want to make sure that you're staying solid with your presence by using consistent images, colors, sounds, etc. on all of the pieces of content that you create. Podcasts, audiograms, videos, blog posts. Okay, tip number 4. What type of engagement are you creating for your community? Remember, you want to make the experience with your podcast as enjoyable and easy to listen to and accessible as possible. Allowing your listeners to interact and engage with the shows allows that relationship to grow even more potent, which comes full circle with the core principles of building a solid and loyal following for your show. Creating this ultimate experience through a personalized podcast app, maybe weekly emails, giving your listeners exclusive content via Patreon. All of this is the root of what will deepen that relationship further and strengthen your podcast community overall. Like I said, just as your podcast brand is unique, your listeners are as well. Envision this journey that they're going to take as they discover your podcast and get down to the details of what it will take to make their experience with your brand unique and enjoyable. Finally, tip number 5. Now, you didn't really think I'd talk about brand strategy without mentioning my favorite word, consistency. Sorry, y'all. But seriously, all the elements, your brand voice, your visual identity elements like your name, your logo, your cover art, should all be consistent across all the channels. 2 main things to remember about this. So the first thing I want you to remember about consistency is you need to keep a consistent schedule. Establish a regular publishing cadence is the key to keeping your audience engaged. Subscribers to your podcast will expect you to upload new episodes simultaneously each week. And you don't want to let them down because you're going to lose them if you do. Now, most podcasters post weekly. But if you find that having a weekly show is just too much, you don't have the time to do a weekly show, that's okay. You could do it every other week, the first and third Thursday, even monthly. The most important thing here is to create and stick to that schedule. If you say you're going to post on Friday morning, every Friday, that's what you need to do. You could always change it, but you have to let them know that you're changing it. That's fine. But just not posting at all or waiting 3 weeks to post your next one, people are going to stop listening and then they're going to unsubscribe. Okay, so the second thing I want you to remember, set your branding and brand guidelines. Now, your podcast primary goal is to promote your brand. Therefore, you want your listeners to remember it. These guidelines help to keep you and whoever is producing your podcasts on track. It also ensures that if you ever work with sponsors or advertisers, they clearly understand your brand identity. Now, if you do not remember anything else that I said today, it's this. The key is consistently staying true to your brand in every aspect and letting your podcast personality shine through. Not mine, not your favorite podcaster, but yours. While traditional branding principles, such as a logo, a name, cover art, are all important, it's the brand that is the main key here. That's why so many successful podcasters maintain brand consistency across all platforms and embrace the brand statement and vision as with other branding efforts. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at tammy@wildfirecreativecompany.com, and I will be more than happy to answer them on a future show. Okay, speaking of coaching questions, this week, that's what we are doing for our special segment, and this was sent in by April Watson of Wichita Falls, Texas. April's question was, what is better, XLR or USB mics? Now, this is one of my favorite questions because I love both. And it just depends on what your budget is, what your setup is, how new you are to this. But XLR mics or crossover mics are the audio industry standard. They're used by rock bands, radio stations, and podcasters worldwide. Most of the microphones on the market are XLR. And most professional podcasting or audio recording gear is designed for the XLR microphones. The thing about these mics, while they are amazing audio quality, they do require some sort of interface to use them because they capture an analog signal using 3-pronged male and female connectors, so there's no way to connect it to your computer. Now, a USB mic features the same elements as the XLR, but it plugs right into your computer's USB port, so you don't have to purchase a lot of the additional audio equipment. So basically, it comes down to this. XLRs are going to give you the best quality, hands down. There's no way around that. However, they're expensive. If you have the budget for it, then I recommend the XLR and the associated gear you'll need with it. You can get a Zoom PodTrack 4 or an audio interface. The one that I like right now is really the Scarlett 2i2. But like I said, you're going to spend a lot of money on these things. So if you're just getting started, you don't have a big budget, you're not really sure how this whole podcasting thing is going to work, then I suggest you get a USB mic. That way you can easily just plug it into your computer and you're basically ready to go. You could always upgrade to an XLR type mic when you are ready. Now, I've mentioned it here on the show, but Rode mics are my absolute favorite. They have USB ones and they have XLR ones, and they are excellent with amazing quality. So if you have a coaching or recommendation question, please feel free to email me at tammy@wildfirecreativecompany.com or send me a DM on Instagram, and we can be found at Wildfire Creative Co. Now, next week, we are talking all about the holidays. I know, that sounds a little weird, right? But they are right around the corner, y'all, and they are going to get here before we know it. But what we're really talking about is what to do with your podcast during the holidays. Do you pause it? Do you keep going? Do you re-air older episodes? What do you do? Well, I'm going to give you all my best tips on exactly what I recommend that you do. So friend, I want to see you accomplish your dreams and your goals. Imposter syndrome and podcast overwhelm and intimidating tech should not stop you from accomplishing your goals, whatever they may be. So let's continue to walk through this journey together. So you, friend, can spend less time worrying about all the details and more time spreading your message, being consistent, and sharing your story. I hope that you have a great day. I hope this episode was helpful for you. And I will talk to you next Monday. Bye, y'all.